The light above you costs a fraction of a penny an hour to run. For most of human history, it was so expensive that people rationed it, a single candle, guarded through the evening and put out during prayers so it wouldn't be wasted. Cheaper, it turns out, doesn't always feel like it. This is the story of how the most expensive thing in an ordinary home became the one thing nobody thinks about, measured not in dollars, but in how long a person had to work for it. And it explains why, even as light collapsed in price, the cost of living kept climbing anyway. There's only one fair way to measure it. Dollars drift across the centuries, but a lumen, the actual unit of light, means the same thing in every era. So the honest question isn't what light cost. It's how many hours of work it took to afford. In ancient Babylon, nearly 4,000 years ago, a full day of labor bought roughly 10 minutes of light from a simple oil lamp. Not 10 hours. 10 minutes. By the year 1800, in America, lighting a room for one evening still cost hours of work. Today, an hour of the average wage buys more light than a person could burn through in years. The economist William Nordhaus put a number on that gap. An hour of work now buys about 350,000 times as much light as it did in early Babylon. That is not a figure of speech. He measured it. The size of that drop is one thing. The reason behind it is stranger. And it's why light, almost alone among the things people buy, moved in the opposite direction from everything else. The real question isn't how cheap light became. It's what made it so expensive to begin with, and what finally broke that. For almost all of history, light was expensive for one blunt reason. Fire is a terrible way to make light. An open flame throws off heat, smoke, and only a thin sliver of brightness, and most of the wood's energy leaves as warmth nobody was trying to make. A candle does a little better, an oil lamp better still, but each works the same way. Set something alight and accept that only a fraction comes back as light. That was the ceiling for thousands of years. The problem was never finding more fuel to burn. It was getting more light out of the same fire, and almost nobody could. So light stayed dear. A colonial American household burned through 300 to 400 candles a year, and making them was one of the hardest chores of the autumn, rendering animal fat into tallow and dipping wick after wick for a light that was dim, smoky, and carefully saved. The best candles, made from a waxy substance taken from the head of the sperm whale, burned clean and bright and cost far more than most families could spare. And that whale is where the story turns for the first time. By the middle of the 1800s, the brightest, cleanest light money could buy came from whale oil, and hunting it had grown into a major American industry. At its peak, the American whaling fleet numbered more than 700 ships, ranging across the world's oceans to keep lamps burning back home. Sperm oil sold for around $2 a gallon, a couple $100s in today's money, and the hunting was relentless enough that the whales began to vanish. What saved them wasn't mercy, it was a cheaper substitute. In 1859, the first oil well was drilled in Pennsylvania, and the kerosene refined from it burned brighter and cost far less. Within 2 decades, the whaling fleet had collapsed from hundreds of ships to fewer than 40. As Nordhaus put it, kerosene lit the world and saved the whales. A market that had powered an entire industry vanished, not because anyone chose to end it, but because something cheaper made it pointless. Then came electricity. In 1879, after testing thousands of materials, Thomas Edison had a bulb that could burn for hours, and by 1882, the first power station was lighting a district of New York. The bulb was a real leap, brighter and steadier, with no open flame in the room. But it still made light the old way, by heating something until it glowed, and most of the energy still escaped as heat. Anyone who has held a hand near an old bulb has felt it. Most of the power warms the room, and the light comes almost as an afterthought. The real break came late, and from an unlikely place. Red and green light-emitting diodes had existed since the 1960s, small and efficient and almost cool to the touch. But white light also needs blue, and blue defeated engineers for 3 decades. The physics simply would not cooperate. It was finally solved in the early 1990s by a researcher named Shuji Nakamura, working at a small chemical company in Japan. His breakthrough made bright white LED light possible, and it earned him a share of the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2014. For a discovery that would reshape a global industry, his employer first paid him a bonus of about $200. He later sued and settled for millions. And with that, light finally shed the fire it had leaned on for 100,000 years. An LED burns nothing. It turns electricity almost straight into light, more than 200 lumens from a single watt, where an open fire gave off almost none. The fall shows up inside a single lifetime of prices. An LED bulb that cost more than $100 around 2008 sells for a couple of dollars now. A 60-watt bulb of the old kind costs about a penny an hour to run, and an LED giving off the very same light costs a small fraction of that. And one detail matters here, because it's easy to get wrong. The electricity itself did not get cheaper. In recent years, the price of power has gone up, not down. Every bit of the saving came from the bulb, from getting more light out of less energy, not from cheaper power. Which leads to the part that reaches past light itself. When Nordhaus lined up the true fall in the price of light against the official record, the figures used to track the cost of living, the two barely matched. The official numbers had missed almost the entire drop. By his measure, the recorded price of light ran about 1,000 times higher than what light actually cost, once its leap in quality was counted. For 2 centuries, the single greatest bargain in the household budget was nearly invisible in the statistics. And that points straight back at the puzzle in the opening. If light became almost free, and clothing and televisions and countless manufactured things slid down the same path, why does life feel more expensive, not less? The answer is that the things which got cheaper are the things a machine can make. The things that stayed expensive are the things a person still has to do. A string quartet takes exactly as many musicians and minutes to perform today as it did 200 years ago. So does a haircut, an hour of a nurse's time, a teacher in a room. The economist William Baumol gave that pattern its name. Automation pours cheap goods and cheap light into one side of the budget, while care, housing, and teaching quietly take over the other. So the light overhead has fallen to almost nothing, and hardly anyone notices, which is exactly the point. What technology can reach, it makes cheap enough to forget. What it can't reach stays with us and grows. The bill that keeps people awake at night was never the light. It's everything the light was supposed to make easier.